So this happened a few years ago. My friend and I were 14 at the time and going through our rebellious teenager phase. There wasn't much to do in our town, so we were always looking for new ways to entertain ourselves. One night, we were having a sleepover and we were looking up weird Wikipedia articles. This is how we stumbled across an article on Scientology. For those of you who are unaware, Scientology is basically this big New Age religion based on eradicating the bad from your past and present lives, and the goal is to reach God status. Sounds pretty cool, right? That's what I thought too. We looked up the Church of Scientology in our area, and there was actually one about 20 minutes away from us. My parents were already asleep as it was relatively late at night, so we decided we would sneak out to see it. The reason we wanted to go visit it is because we had heard that it was monitored, and we wanted to go and flip off the cameras. Like I said, we were in our rebellious teenager phase, and we were looking for any kind of dumb, reckless entertainment. We meant nothing against the church, we just wanted to be really edgy. We snuck out through our front door. My parents were heavy sleepers, so this wasn't really a hard task. We followed the map we printed out and walked a few blocks, nothing exciting, and then we got to the church. Now, I admit, this was a stupid thing of us to do. Classic dumb teenager pranks, but we were never expecting this to happen. We would have stayed inside if we had known what would happen. So, we were standing in front of the church. We were looking for the cameras around the building, but we found none. We had been feeling particularly reckless that night, I suppose, and we decided to go inside. We tried the doors, but they were locked. We were about to just turn around and go home, when we saw a figure just to the left of the building. Then we saw another person on the other side of the building. They were hidden in the shadows, but we could tell they were staring at us. That's when we decided it was best to leave. We walked away, thinking it was a little weird, but luckily we knew our way home. We were stopped, waiting to cross the road, a few minutes away from the church, when we noticed them again. They had followed us from the church. They were both wearing sunglasses, even though it was late at night, and were both wearing all black. One of them held a camera in his hand, while the other simply stared. We were freaked out, but we were stopped at the light, and time slowed. As soon as the light changed, we broke into a run. Our house was still pretty far away, and we were two teenage girls alone in the dark, and these men were creepy. We ran far, and when we were out of their sight, we ducked into an alleyway and hid behind a small bush. When they passed, my blood ran cold. We both held our breath, and thankfully, they ran right past. We waited about 20 minutes, and then slowly crept out of the alleyway. Thankfully, they were nowhere in sight, but we were still extremely on edge. We made it home with no other incident, and we snuck back in through the back door. It was hard to sleep, and we stayed up whispering about it, still terrified, but excited that we had a crazy story to share with our friends. A few minutes later, we looked out the window, and I almost let out a scream. They were outside, looking up at our house. We had no idea what to do. We couldn't tell my parents for fear of getting in trouble, since they didn't know we had gone out at all. We couldn't call the cops since technically we had tried to get into the building. We were at a complete loss and just silently cried with each other. An hour later, we looked out again and they were gone. We were relieved but still terrified and stayed up all night watching movies to try and take our mind off the incident. After this, we had thought the whole thing had ended and we vowed to never do anything that had to do with Scientology again. We had told everyone we knew about this creepy incident and we had become local celebrities at our middle school. Then one day, a few days after the incident, I got a phone call from a blocked number. I thought it was a little weird, but I brushed it off. I figured it was probably a prank call from one of my friends. I ignored the next few calls until I had finally had enough. I answered the phone and waited for the other person to talk. Silence on the other line. I spoke, but nothing. Surely it was a prank call, but it wasn't a very good one, that's for sure. An hour later, the blocked number called again. The same thing happened for a few days. Every few hours I'd get a call, answer it, and the other person would say nothing. It was annoying, but it was nothing to worry about. Then one day, this pattern broke. I picked up after a few calls and heard a voice on the other line. "Hello," a man said. I responded, confused, as this was definitely not any of my friends. All this time I had thought it was prank phone calls because me and my friends did that all the time. But this was no middle schooler. "What did you want with us 5 days ago?" he asked. My heart stopped. It must have been one of the men from the church the other night. I hung up immediately, terrified, and texted my friend about it. She was equally as shocked, and we had no idea how they got my number. He called back a few times, but I always denied it. Then, I started getting texts, saying things like, "We want you to come back. We saw your aura. You have potential to be great. Theta waits for you, if you so choose to engage with us." Then he started texting me these weirdly invasive questions, some of them being, "What are your crimes? Have you ever killed? What is your first memory? What dark thoughts plague you?" Things like that, asking very personal questions that made me very uncomfortable. I responded, asking them to please cut off all contact with me. He responded with, "I hope to see you soon." I blocked his number. Nothing else ever came from this, and I never saw those men again. I'm sure not everyone in this religion is like this. This was probably just a couple of extremists that are going to crazy lengths to try and recruit me. But needless to say, creepy men, let's not meet again. This happened in 2006 in Carpinteria, California. I'm 17 and living with some family friends because my parents moved out of state. It's the end of summer and we decide to drive up to Carpinteria and camp for a few days on the beach in a camper. In addition to me and the family is my friend's boyfriend and his friend and the younger daughter's friend. Towards the end of the week, I'm sitting in my bed in the main part of the camper. Their daughter, who was my age, was supposed to be sleeping in the other bed, but she had snuck out to be with her boyfriend in his tent. I am still not very tired, but I have to pee, so I use this as an excuse to get outside for a bit. The toilet in the camper wasn't hooked up, so we had to go to the public campground bathrooms. I head outside and the fresh air perks me up a bit. It's a beautiful, warm summer night, so I decide that instead of using the bathroom closest to our camper, I'll walk to the one on the other side of the campground. It's about a 5-minute walk away. It's pretty dark and no one else seems to be awake, but I don't mind. The campground feels safe and peaceful. The only sound is the waves washing onto the beach to my right. To the left, a warm breeze blows through the trees. Farther down the path ahead of me is a single street light and some picnic tables. Just ahead is the bathroom. As I pass the picnic area, something catches my eye. My eyes focus and I realize it's a man. An older looking man with the palest skin I've ever seen. Not just pale, but grayish white. He's crouching rather than sitting on the bench of the table, and as I get closer I realize he's completely naked. I had never seen a naked man in real life before, so this alone made me really uncomfortable. Then his head turns and he looks straight at me. I don't know how to describe his eyes except that they looked demonic. In fact, there was something about him that just didn't seem human. The best description I can think of is that he looked like Gollum from Lord of the Rings. His lips curled upwards into a sort of smile, revealing sharp-looking teeth. That's when it hits me that I can be in real danger. I ran as fast as I could to the camper and locked the door behind me. My friend's friend was back by this point and asked what happened to me. I said something like, "Naked old man with white skin." She had no idea what I was talking about, but offered to walk me to the closer bathroom so I could finally pee. Once we got back and I calmed down, I told her more details about what I saw. She didn't have any explanation, but advised me not to go out by myself at night anymore. The next day, we asked around if anyone else had seen him, but no one had. The rest of the trip was pretty uneventful, thankfully, but what I saw that night still bothers me to this day. For reference, at the time I was a 9-year-old girl, but I still remember it like it was yesterday. I'm a bit hesitant to share this story, but I feel like it would almost be a relief to get it off my chest, because I know someone will listen to this and actually believe me for once. Picture the scene. A petite 9-year-old girl gets into an argument with her neighborhood friends, and in a huff, she storms off into the woods. We were no stranger to the woods. In fact, us kids practically lived there. We climbed trees and skimmed stones across the creek in the summer, and we scared ourselves with ghost stories when it was Halloween. Being able to be this independent at such a young age was great, but there was one place we weren't allowed to go. My parents told us not to go down there into the bracken. There was no excuses. Not wanting our privilege of freedom to be taken away, we obeyed. Anyway, I fell out with my friends, something about not having the right colored bracelet, I don't really remember, and in a huff, I stormed into the woods. We were told that morning that at 6 p.m. we weren't allowed back into the woods. It was roughly about 7:30 when I ran in by myself. The plan was I would go in, find a log, and calm myself down. Unfortunately, the group of kids followed me, threatening to hit me because I broke curfew, and now they were going to get into trouble too. I saw several of the kids start to get sticks and pebbles, and I assumed that's what they were going to use to hit me. In a state of pure terror, I ran further into the woods, past the creek, and, for some stupid reason, straight into the bracken. I heard the kids shouting at me, telling me to come out, but I kept crawling until I found a separate mud trail. I followed the trail, and the kids' voices sounded further and further away, until I couldn't hear them at all. It was quiet. I could hear my heartbeat in my head and some heavy breathing. But the thing was, it wasn't my breathing. I scanned the trees around me and spotted a man. He was crouched in the ferns and was chewing on his foot. He was about 6'5" and was stick thin. He was staring straight into my eyes. He slowly crawled over to me until we were a meter apart from each other. I was too scared to run. He was wearing nothing but soiled underwear and stank of stale beer. His head was shaved and he had about 3 teeth in total. He dragged me to the floor and took a fistful of dead leaves, which he then shoved into my mouth to stifle my screams. I knew about stranger danger, and I knew about rape. I was terrified. He lay on top of me. His feces were leaking onto my t-shirt. He took his wiry hands and placed them on my thighs. He moved them towards my ankles. I heard footsteps above the bracken. It was my parents and my neighbors. I couldn't scream. The leaves were crammed down my throat. All I could do was hope they could find me. As all this was happening, the man panicked. He could have ran right there and then, but instead he pulled my sandals off and shoved my foot into his disgusting mouth. My painted nails rubbed against his gristly gums. I picked up a stone and threw it into the ferns in an attempt to get my parents' attention. Thank God it worked. But even when my dad jumped down, the man wouldn't stop. He was nibbling on my foot now, and my dad lost it. He attacked this loony, and in shock, the man bit into my flesh, hard. The man scampered off, and my dad helped me up. When we got home, I told them everything. My mom couldn't stop crying at the state of me. There was her 9-year-old daughter, covered in mud and feces with one sandal on one foot and a chunk of flesh missing out of the other. The police were called, but there wasn't anything they could do, as the man was long gone. I still have the scar on my foot, and I haven't gone into the woods since. So, to the man in the woods who ate my flesh, let's not meet. This was a year ago, when me, my little brother, and my mom lived in an apartment complex out in Howell, Michigan. I was 18 at the time, and I'm 19 now. Now, some backstory to this. Both of my parents were divorced, and I'd stay at periodic times with both of them. My mom had moved several times, from Jackson to Flint to Detroit, and finally Howell. She has her own place now in a different city, which is great. Well, Howell is a small town between Brighton and Lansing, for those who don't know about it, and it's rather redneck-ish, although some famous people are from there. It's good and bad, as it has a lot of KKK supporters, but at the same time, the rapper Bones is from that town, which halfway redeems it, I guess. It seemed like a normal day. Walk for half an hour or so to a small gas station just across from the Maher to get a nos and a couple of monsters. While there, some guy behind me was way too close for my comfort. I'm not a homophobe or anything, although I am a bit introverted, and I don't like people being too close to me unless I know them well or I think they're cute. I bought the nos and monster, thanked the lady behind the bulletproof glass/plastic, and turned to go my way. I'm usually able to tell someone's emotions or a feeling if they're trustworthy or not, since most of the time I've always been able to naturally pick up on that. As I looked over, this guy was between somewhat skinny and pudgy with some pretty lifeless eyes. Now, I won't say anything about that, as I figured he could have been bipolar or depressed. Heck, my parents thought I had antisocial personality disorder for the longest time, when I really just don't like people or large crowds a lot since they're extroverts. Anyways, I started walking home, and for those who don't know, I have to walk across a busy intersection just to take the path across a wooden bridge and park to get to said apartment complex. Now, I felt like someone was staring at me, and it was the dead of summer, and the day was muggy as all hell. I kinda turned around to look, and the guy who stood so close behind me earlier is probably 20 feet away from me. Or something. I didn't hear what he said, but it sounded something like, "You're just like me?" I didn't know what he meant by that, so I kinda laughed it off and said, "What? I didn't hear you." He didn't really say anything and kinda walked off. I figured, finally, he left me alone, so I can go home and order some Chinese food. Anyways, I got home and nothing seems out of the ordinary. It's about 10 p.m. and night rolls around. I'm sitting in bed Skyping with my friend who is in New York. He'd moved when he was younger. We were talking about some annoying people in a web browsing game we played called National States. That's when I heard what sounded like faint scratching. I ignored it at first, thinking it was just the neighbors. But then I heard a large slap against the glass, and I thought, what the fuck? And I was now a bit uneasy. I decided to pull back the curtains, and there was the same weird dude from before just staring back at me. Now, I shared a bedroom with my little brother, who was just going to kindergarten, and I had slept on a pullout while he slept in his own bunk bed. I immediately felt my heart drop for a moment and wasn't sure what happened next because it seemed so surreal. I told my little brother to get up and go into my mom's room and tell her to call the police because a man was outside. I immediately ran out of my room after basically pushing him out as quickly as possible and went to the side closet where I kept my stuff. Now, my dad didn't like me living in the big cities alone with my mom, so he'd gotten me a gun to protect myself when I was younger. It was a long rifle 36. I always kept it unloaded and on safety. Well, I loaded that thing up and took off the safety. Then the patio light went off. Not really a patio, it kind of went into the ground, but it had chairs and a little table. You get the idea. This dude was trying to break into the house and force the door open. I immediately put the rifle up and yelled at him that if he tried coming through that door, I'd fucking murder him. Obviously not the best word choice since we lived on the bottom floor and had neighbors above us. Not only that, but it could have been bad if I had shot him before he passed the door and was outside the door itself. He kind of froze up and then got a hold of himself and bolted. My mom came back having called the cops and was terrified to death since she originally thought my little brother just had a nightmare, but then she saw me with a gun. The cops eventually came and then left. There really wasn't any evidence and the description I gave them never went anywhere. But goddamn, that was probably the scariest stuff I've been through in my life. A day later, the landlord put flyers on every door that said not to knock on windows or doors at night, as it was a breach of privacy and danger to tenants. To whoever you were, intruder, let's not meet again, or you may lose more than a dull look next time.